We believe that nothing is more crucial to the issues that are being discussed here than the whole question of privatization and commodification of water. The political question really is who owns water and who gets to control water. Here you're going to hear, or you are hearing, two very, very different visions of a future for water. On one side are those who see water as an economic good that basically should be governed by the marketplace principles that more or less govern the trade in any other good, from cars to television sets to computer chips. The question here is, or the answer on this side, is to put water on the open market for sale to the highest bidder. And corporations, and we are talking, let's face it, with companies like Vivendi and Suez and RWE Thames, about corporations that are all in the top 100 richest corporations in the world. These corporate rights are then protected very much in powerful trade and investment agreements, which remove community and political rights from citizens and governments. On the other hand, you're going to hear the voice of a growing civil society movement who has a vision of water as a part of the global commons. We believe that water needs to be exempted from the rules of the market and treated as a public trust for all time by governments everywhere. Basically, we see this as an issue of human rights versus corporate rights. Now let's remind ourselves that we are here to deal with an enormous crisis around water privatization, around water scarcity around the world. But it's not just an issue of access, and what we're hearing over and over at the Third World Water Forum is an issue of access, how to get water to those who need it. Very, very essential question. There's very little discussion about the fact that there may not be enough water if we continue to deplete, pollute, and divert water at this astonishing rate at which we are doing it. And there's very little talk in any of these forums. It was the same at the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg around stopping the pollution, stopping the excessive waste, and stopping the abuse by industry and large corporate farming and by people in the first world of water systems around the world. Quite simply, we are running out of water, and the very important question then becomes, what do we do? We believe strongly that the only way that we're going to have a water-secure future is if we build a new water ethic based on the twin foundations of conservation on one side and equitable distribution on the other. If we don't stop destroying water systems, we'll never catch up to the people who need it, because we will run out of water. We are now taking water from the groundwater systems far faster than nature can replenish them. Now, these two twin principles of conservation and equity are two principles that would bankrupt any serious corporation, even a corporation that has strong ethical belief that it wants to deliver water to the world's people. Everything right now in our society, we live in a time governed by what has been termed the Washington Consensus. That is that everything's for sale. There used to be a time when areas like healthcare and education and genes and seeds, the diversity of our food, and most particularly water, were all seen as either fundamental social or human rights or what we needed for ecological survival, and therefore out of bounds of the marketplace. But in recent years, what we have seen is a kind of a theft of the commons, the notion that absolutely everything should be commodified and put on the open market. And it is happening very, very fast. In fact, we believe that that's what the Third World Water Forum is about. We believe it's about consolidating gains and mitigating losses. You will know that the major water companies are unhappy with what's happened to them in the developing world. They are retreating in some very serious ways. Up to a third of the holdings of the major two corporations are being withdrawn from the third world. And this is all happening against a demand for refinancing so that these companies don't have to take the risk that goes with currency speculation or currency drops or the political opposition that they're finding in countries around the world. And we have a litany of stories. I know our friends on the right here know that we have a litany of stories, including some very recent stories. The most recent being Suez being asked to leave Atlanta, Georgia, which is the biggest water privatization project in North America, after just 2 years of a 20-year contract. So there's a lot of work to be done at this forum to save a lot of face. We are very clearly opposed to private-public partnerships. We think that the government takes the majority of the risk in these PPPs, and we believe that the corporations increasingly are taking most of the benefits. And we are deeply concerned about the fact that and we can give you the litany of the water coming out of the taps turned brown and the high cost of water that's priced out of people's range and so on. But even a corporation that is running in a more open and ethical manner still has to find, and this is the heart of our argument, still has to find a certain percentage of all public money that is given to it to deliver water to people in order to pay investors, usually transnational corporate investors offshore. And they simply cannot use 100% of that funding to deliver water back. There has to be some kind of corner cut. Michael Moore asked about the whole issue of full cost recovery. I don't think anyone on our side is opposed to the notion of, once we have a water lifeline for everyone on earth, of having some kind of a sliding scale for pricing water. But there is a fundamental difference between whether you do that in the public sector, which means that the money that's recovered from pricing goes back to fix up and clean up water infrastructure systems, it goes to reclaim polluted waters, it goes to make sure water is equitably distributed, whereas in a private, corporate-controlled system, the full cost recovery means full cost recovery for profits of the corporation. And we see a very clear distinction between those two kind of concepts. Now, we are not here saying all is well with governments. We have governments. My government in Canada is not looked after our water supply. I mean, we deliver good public water, but we have been very careless. We are a water-wealthy country that has been careless with our water. And it is my deep belief that people in countries like ours are going to have to answer to the world's people about, when they come knocking on the door for our water, about whether we have been good sovereign keepers of that water. And we also have to acknowledge there are many places in the world where governments at this point are unable to deliver water to their people. But we have to ask ourselves why that is so, and what role the whole issue of debt plays in the fact that so many third world countries are unable to provide health care or education or housing or clean water to their people. And if we in the so-called North are really concerned about delivering water to the people, we have to talk about canceling that third world debt, increasing foreign aid, bringing in a tax on financial speculation, which would allow us to build public infrastructure for schools and hospitals and clean water in every country in the world. And if the World Bank has money to give to its corporate friends, why surely can that same public money not be used to deliver assistance to governments and communities to help them build really good public sector systems to their people? Quite simply, the alternative to bad government, inadequate government or corrupt government is not a private transnational corporation or an investment pool of money that is not accountable to anyone except its investors, but rather good government. Surely we're all here to work towards that. The case against privatization, we feel, is a very, very strong one. We believe that it's mounting around the world. Decisions basically in a privatized system, decisions regarding water are made on a commercial, not environmental or social justice considerations. And we believe very, very strongly that in the end, we have to say that water must be exempted from these kind of rules, that there are areas of life, and water is primary among them, that must be marked as off-limit to profit and to corporations and to the private sector. It's not to say we say there's no role for the private sector in helping to build infrastructure, in advising governments, in sharing expertise, but to turn over concessions to corporations that get 50, 60, 70, 100-year concessions to make money because they built the original infrastructure is wrong, and we simply cannot allow that kind of model. We say that water, the answer to the question, who owns water, is that no one owns water, that water belongs to the earth, that water belongs to all species and future generations. Water is a fundamental human right, and water is a public trust that must be guarded by all levels of government for all time. Thank you.
you.